All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hope everyone had a nice weekend, and hope everyone is doing well. Now there was a Langdell on Saturday, right? How'd it go? Good. Good. How many of you went? Just show of hands. Oh, beautiful. Okay, virtually everyone here. That's very good. I'm glad to hear that. So everyone knows the midterm is on Monday, and let me clarify this because Garrett said people weren't clear. The exam is pass-fail, but it doesn't mean I won't fail anyone. Okay. So the consequence of failing is this: when you have a final grade, you have a participation score, right? Under our rules, I'm allowed to go down a third. So we got a B, it becomes a B minus. Okay. If I find that you fail this exam, you go down a third. It's not a terribly serious incentive, but it's enough incentive that I think you have some skin in the game. So I don't want you to blow this off. Now, I don't want you to be too concerned, right? This is not going to be super difficult. It's not going to be cumulative the entire semester. We only have 14 classes. But I do want you to take it seriously. If at this point you haven't started outlining, you should do that now. You should walk into this exam with something that looks like your outline that you would have for your final exam. That's the reason why at South Texas we're doing this, to make sure that you're actually prepared for this before the semester ends. Far too many people start outlining all the way into the semester, which I think is extremely problematic. Okay. Again, if you make a serious good faith effort preparing, you will pass. There's no problem. If you walk in there saying, "Oh, whatever, I'm just gonna be prepared to get a participation negative," and that's all I can say about that. I want to make sure you guys take this seriously. It's for your benefit, not mine. It makes more work for me. I have to grade it. I have to write a new question. I mean, it's more work for me. But I want to make sure that this is something that's meaningful for you. All right. Any question about the exam? Yes, sir.
Can you bring an outline?
Of course you can bring everything. It's a completely open book. I mean, entirely open book won't help you. The point of the outline is to force you to study. It's not to actually have a piece of paper in your hand, right? I mean, maybe there might be some rule or definition you forget, but really it's not going to help you. Any other questions? No? All right, I want to plug an event tomorrow because I'm speaking at it. So the federal side and campus, we're having a Supreme Court roundup, three amigos, as it were. I am one of them, I suppose. Professor Kelso is going to be there also. He's the first amigo. And it's going to be at the 6th floor library at noon. I'm sorry, at 11. I don't think any of your class is there, so I strongly encourage you to attend. It's a roundup of the past Supreme Court term, and we will give a preview of what happens in the next Supreme Court term. For any of you interested in constitutional law, we'll maybe discuss a couple of property cases. Oh, yes, we will. In fact, Horn, one of the cases we'll discuss later this year, it's a case involving taking of raisins. I will be discussing it. So if you get a little preview of property, if you want to come tomorrow, there's food, Jimmy John. So if you'll have sandwiches. This is a fun event. Ilya is a good friend. I've known him for years. We have a very good shtick back and forth. I think you will enjoy it very much. So hopefully you guys can attend that as well. Any questions on that? Okay. So let's move back to property for a second. So we're starting a new topic today that's probably the most intellectually demanding topic of the entire semester. I don't say that to suggest the other stuff is easy, because it's not. But the topic of servitudes traditionally gives students the most trouble of all the topics I teach. Even worse than future interest, interestingly enough. This topic gives students the biggest trouble. So I encourage you, the readings stay only, what, like 11 or 12 pages? Not very much, right? Next class also, the readings are pretty light. Read this stuff very slowly because it gets confusing extremely quickly. And the reason why this stuff gets confusing extremely quickly is because of terminology. Okay, the same way that you had difficulty last semester identifying the various types of future interests, because there were the fee simple and the fee simple determinable and the subsequent condition subsequent. You have a similar problem here. And I'm afraid the book does not do a very good job of explaining this simply. Usually this book is quite good, but for this topic, I think the book does a lackluster job, which is unfortunate. Even the first few pages of this section, where they laid out the different types of servitude, you're probably very confused, like what the heck are they talking about? Okay, so I want to walk through this very slowly and very methodically, and want to keep track of various terminologies. And we'll be building on these terminologies throughout today, tomorrow, and the future class. All right? So the major topic, the umbrella, if you will, is what's called a servitude. Okay? The title of the chapter is called servitudes. Okay, servitudes, and this is a rough definition, but it's a way of burdening one parcel of land to benefit another. A servitude, like servant, right, is a way of burdening one parcel of land to benefit another. Now, last semester when you guys studied Property 1, you discussed different ways of burdening property, and I'll give you the easiest example, right? A gets Blackacre so long as Blackacre is used as a church, right? You remember these? Feasible, determinable. So long as property has been using a certain way, A gets to keep it. And if A no longer keeps a church there, it goes to somebody else, right? No difficulties there. These sorts of future interests, though, became very difficult to manage for reasons I'm sure you studied last year. Because the second that person no longer uses a church, what was the remedy? He lost the property, right? That's a very serious remedy to take property away from someone if they fail to meet a condition. So over the course of hundreds of years, and indeed this is a hundreds of years process, property law developed different ways of burdening property without using future interests, okay? And the entire nature of what we're going to be discussing today and tomorrow and the subsequent classes is how we can burden property without using future interests. Okay, you're with me so far. What drives people crazy is the terminology, because you can often call the same thing 2 or 3 different categories. All right. The two major types of servitudes that we'll be studying are called easements and covenants. We'll do covenants later, so I'm going to put that to the side. I just want you to know that's the second type. Okay. The first type of servitude we'll be discussing is called the easement. Okay. The purpose of an easement is to, like I said here, give one piece of land a burden, and give the second party and the land a benefit. Okay, so I'll give you a really easy example, and I'll try to use this example throughout the class. I may switch it up a little bit. Okay. All right. So where did I finish up last time? Oh, Dominique, thank you. All right. So Dominique, let me ask this question. Right. Let's say, let's make up easy names. Right. There are 2 pieces of land. There's wet acre and there's dry acre. Right. Wet acre has a lake on it, and dry acre does not. Easy, right. You have some animals that you need to get, watered and cleaned and other stuff. Right. But you live on dry acre. So what are your options of making sure that your animals get water? How would you go about doing that if you're a farmer back in common law England?
I would ask here on dry acre if I can see fine cattle over there.
Good. Yeah, right? You would ask him. Now, if we're living in the year 2015, the way we accomplish this is with money. You say, I will give you, $1,000 a month if I can bring my cows to your land, right? But, and this is important to remember, there were no sorts of these monetary arrangements back in jolly old common law England. Everything was done through the law of property. So, Dominique, how would you go about actually acquiring this sort of interest back in common law England? I'm sorry? Oh, good, good, good. So what would the exchange look like? Ooh, yeah, that's good. I like that, right? Actually, I like the very good example. You arrange various negotiations or bargaining with the other party, okay? So you would make, for argument's sake, something called an easement, right? And the easement would look like this. Just make it really easy, right? So I would say the owner of dry acre and bring livestock onto wet acre. Okay, like that, right? And then maybe this is in exchange for wood or something else. I don't really care about that now. But you basically make an easement. The owner of dry acre can bring livestock onto wet acre. Everyone with me, right? All right, so Josh, let me ask you this question though. What happens when, God forbid, but Dominique isn't with us anymore and her son or daughter inherits dry acre? What happens to the son or daughter? Are their cows going to, starve and not have any water, die of thirst? Why not? You're saying the correct thing, but the terminology is slightly off, but you're right. The interesting thing, right, about easements, and this is one of the trickier aspects, is I phrase this very deliberately. The easement belongs to the owner of the land, regardless of who that is. The easement belongs to the owner of the land, regardless of who it is. So if it's Dominique's easement today for the benefit of the owner of dry acre, when Dominique, God forbid, dies or she sells it, right? Whoever steps into her shoes as new owner of dry acre now stands to benefit. Josh, why do you think property transactions back in jolly old England were framed in terms of not just Dominique, but whoever owns dry acre? Why do you think they structure them in this manner? Good, Sam, you want to take a stab? That's a good answer, but I want to try another one?
Would it have anything to do with like prescriptive rights of like establishing it for so long so it continues on for generations?
Not what I was looking for. It's actually a good answer. Want to try, Mike? Why do you think back in jolly old England, if you have dry acre and wet acre next to each other, they would try and negotiate this sort of easement that kind of goes on beyond the life of the current owner? Yeah, actually, that's basically exactly right. If you had a farm on dry acre, right, your kids are going to have that farm. Your grandkids are going to have that farm. Your great-grandkids are going to have that farm. These were kept in the town for generations. And you needed to make sure that your farm had a source of water. So you would actually negotiate these sorts of easements, right? And the phrase, which I want you to just jot down your notes, is to run with the land. We'll do a little bit more on this later, but the idea was you actually put this easement on the deed, right? This easement then controls anyone who buys wet acre and then anyone who buys dry acre, right? This is meant to travel along with the owner of the parcel. Everyone with me so far? If you don't, stop me, because it keeps getting more and more complicated. This is so far good? Yes, sir.
So if the owner sold the land, whoever bought it would have the easement.
Exactly. If Dominique sold it, or if Dominique Godfrey passed away, whoever gets it now benefits from this easement. Everyone with me so far? Yes, sir.
This would literally be a term on the lease, like the land extends down to yonder oak tree, but also can be used for cattle.
Exactly right. You actually say on the deed that the owner of dry acre can bring livestock onto the lake of wet acre. You spell it out. Okay. Now, there's two other terms that I want you to write down: a dominant tenement and a servient tenement. A dominant tenement and a servient tenement. Tenement just means piece of land. Don't let that phrase throw you off one bit. Like a tenant, right? A tenement means a piece of land. The dominant tenement is the land that is benefited. Okay? The dominant tenement is the land that is benefited. The servient tenement is the land that is burdened. Okay? When we're trying to describe the two pieces of land involved with an easement, we need to use these terms. Which one's dominant, that is benefited? Which one is servient? Which one is burdened? Brian, so take a stab. So between dry acre and wet acre, which one is dominant and which one is servient? Exactly right. Dry acre is dominant, and then wet acre is servient. How come? Exactly. Right. Exactly right. That's exactly right. Again, this is not hard. This part's easy. Just get your terminology correct, and you'll be fine. Right? Because I'm not going to say which one is burdened, or I won't say the exam which one is benefiting. I'll say which is a dominant estate, or which is a dominant tenement, and you'll have to know what that means. And again, let me just put in parentheses. You'll sometimes see dominant estate as well. It's the same thing. It's state tenement. The book uses, I think, one or the other. I can't remember. They're both the same damn thing. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So like an example, if you're saying exchange services, so is there, like if he gives wood and you give water.
Okay. So then, in the example she gave, there's two sets, right? Because there actually are two different easements. So the example he said, on one side, right, dry acre is being burdened because because they're giving up the wood. And the other side, dry acre is being benefited because they're getting the water. So depending which easement you're talking about, it flips. But you're exactly right. Yes, sir.
So you can simultaneously be a dominant and a serving tenement.
Yeah, but be careful. Let's separate the easements, because the example Dominique gave was actually two separate easements. And she's exactly right. But with respect to one easement, you have dominant and servient, and you flip it around for the other one. Okay? But I only focus on one easement at a time just so I don't confuse you even more. Everyone get this? Okay. Okay, so there's another two terms that I want to introduce to you. Again, this is a lot of terminology, and I want to go real slow, but stop me if you don't get it, okay? The first term is an easement appurtenant. The second term is an easement in gross. There are these two terms. Easement appurtenant, don't say appurtenant, appurtenant, right? And an easement in gross. These describe who gets benefited and who gets burdened. So, over here, notice how I said the owner of dry acre, right? When the easement goes to the owner of a piece of land, whoever that person happens to be, it's appurtenant. Okay? When the benefit goes to whoever owns land, it's an easement appurtenant. So, use the example of there, I could write Dominique and bring livestock onto wet acre. I'll give you a different example. Dominique, I think I told your name wrong, sorry. Dominique can bring livestock into wet acre. Notice it does not say the owner of dry acre. Okay, it says a name. It says a name. This over here, this is called an easement in gross. Okay? Here, I'll just put it here so it's easier to understand. An easement in gross has a name. It says Dominique can bring the livestock onto wet acre. Not the owner of dry acre, but a specific name. Okay? Cameron, let me ask you a question. So with this easement in gross, do you think it matters whether Dominique continues to own dry acre?
Yes.
No.
No.
But why not? Why does it not matter? Just read the text.
Well,
Is there anything in the text of that easement which limits Dominique's easement to the ownership of Dryacre? Right here. Is there anything relating to Dryacre in that easement?
no.
No.
It just says she can.
So I want you to compare, right? This is an easement, and I'm going to type up here so you see it. This is an easement appertenant. Up here, easement appertenant. The owner of Dryacre can bring livestock into Wetacre. Who benefits from that? Who's dominant there?
She's the one bringing it.
What if Dominique sells Dryacre? Who becomes then dominant?
Whoever owns.
Exactly. The big difference between the easement appertenant and the easement in gross is that the easement in gross benefits a person, a specific named individual. The easement appertenant benefits whoever happens to sit on that piece of land. Okay? The easement appertenant basically runs with the land. Dominique has it, and Dominique's son has it, and Dominique's grandson has it, and Dominique's great-grandson has it, right? Whoever still owns that land gets the benefit. But the easement in gross belongs to Dominique. Okay? Even if she sells Dryacre, it's still hers. Now, Dominique can sell her easement in gross. Because what if someone else needs to water their chickens on Wetacre? The easements in gross can be sold. They're what we say is alienable. That the easements in gross can be sold. Okay. Everyone with me so far? Okay, so we have our terminology, right? We described that an easement is an agreement where basically one parcel is burdened and one parcel is benefited. The parcel that's burdened is called the servient estate. The parcel that's benefited is the dominant estate. We said we've had two types of easements. You have the easement appertenant, where the benefit goes to whoever owns the land, and the easement in gross, the benefit belongs to a named individual. Everyone with me so far? If you don't get that, raise your hand. Or if you get it, if a question, raise your hand otherwise. Okay? Go home after class and just review these terminologies and just internalize them. They're not hard, but people, and this happens to every year, students often get tripped up with the terminology.
If you're selling an easement in gross, you don't have to get approval from whoever the easement's.
Exactly. No. And the question was this. So if Dominique wants to sell her easement in gross, does she need approval from the owner of Wetacre? The answer is absolutely not. It's an individual interest which you can invest otherwise. And I'm glad you asked that question. So at the very outset, right, we speak in terms of a bundle of sticks, right? You guys say the bundle of sticks, the idea that, you know, when you have fee simple, you have this entire bundle of sticks, right? Paul, what happens when you sell an easement? What does that do then to your fee simple?
What do you mean?
Well, before you had fee simple, right? You could exclude anyone from your land whenever you wanted. What happens when you give over an easement to the owner of Wetacre? What does that do to your fee simple?
Does it make it a life estate?
Oh, no, it doesn't make it a life estate, right? But what does it do to your power to exclude?
How are you excluding one that is not that right?
Can you exclude people coming from Dryacre to water their cattle? Paul, let's go with this, right? Generally speaking, if you have fee simple, can you exclude anyone you want from your land?
Sure.
Not sure, yes, right?
Yes.
The right to exclude is the most essential stick in the bundle, right? What happens when you give over an easement to, say, Dominique? Can you exclude her?
No,
What happens when Dominique's grandchildren come along? Can you exclude them?
no.
And what happens when you want to sell the land, right? They say, well, do you have a fee simple? I'm like, yeah, I have a fee simple, but FYI, Dominique may come by and, for chickens and cows. What do you think that's the purchase price of your land?
Definitely decreases it
Why?
because it's restricting part like the entire usage of the land.
Exactly, right? And this is the important part to get about easements, which comes up in the first case we'll do in a few minutes. When you put an easement on your land, that stays there pretty much indefinitely. Not exactly, but pretty much indefinitely. And that diminishes the value of your land. So it's not just, Paul and Dominique are friends. You're like, yeah, sure, Dominique, come and buy. Bring your cows, whatever, right? It's your grandchildren and her grandchildren may actually hate each other. Or if you sell the land, whoever comes along and buys it is now burdened. So in terms of the bundle of sticks, right? You have your sticks, you're effectively taking a stick out of the bundle. Your right to exclude is no longer absolute because now you're required to allow onto the land Dominique and her cows, right? Sorry, I'm picking you today, but you're up first. Well, for example?
I don't know, the amount of time, or like you can use the water or get water for whatever for 10 years.
Sure. So, first of all, right, you can make an easement saying this is for Dominique and Dominique alone, right? That would limit it. You could also say this only lasts for, say, 10 years, right? But if you think about it, though, and let's just use the example of Dominique having a farm on Dryacre, she needs to sell that farm eventually. And what's going to happen after 10 years? Whether her chicken's going to stop needing water or her cow's going to stop drinking? So effectively, you often have to negotiate these perpetual easements because the same problem of her cows not having water will emerge after every 10 years. That these servitudes serve a very important purpose of ensuring the ongoing vitality and success of a plot of land. Because if your farm can't get water, it's dead, right? So it's not so easy to say, oh yeah, water the cows for 10 years and worry about something else. Questions?
What if it's under that time, would that be the dominant or the easement?
Upper tenant. You can make either one limited by time. It doesn't really matter.
Like you do it for 10 years, you say like the person's older and then they die.
Right, but, and I'll say this point again, with an easement in gross, Dominique can sell her interest. So it doesn't die with her. She can devise it to her heirs. She can give it to someone else. So it doesn't matter how old she is. I'm sorry, Dominique, you really rough time today. It's okay. Other questions? Yes.
Yes, I have a question. Because last semester, we studied the being simple, something future interests. I think these interests are ownership, but the easement is the interests in others' person's land. So it's not my ownership. Am I right?
Well, so for her question was this. She said last semester you studied future interest, right?
Yeah,
These were-
future interests and facing person.
So servitudes are very different than future interests, right?
Ah,
The main reason is they're not in the future; they're in the present.
mm,
It's your right to bring a cow to the lake today, not after someone dies.
present.
So the rules governing future interests are very different than the rules governing servitude. And I don't try to confuse the two because they're quite different. And in fact, I think I mentioned at the beginning of class, the rules governing servitudes evolved because future interests were so difficult to deal with, right? Because the future interests were so tough, you have to wait till someone dies and this or that. Servitudes emerged to have a very short-term, a 5-year temporary period, very easy to deal with. Make sense?
Yeah.
You're welcome. Other questions? Yes.
Can you limit it like for the water just on the east side of the lake?
Sure.
Like that?
Yeah, you can specify an easement however you want. Yeah, again, since you're diminishing the value of your property for yourself and your heirs, pretty much, you then have to have a specific route. Because what if you say you can only use this part of the lake and he goes to the other part of the lake while he's trespassing. Okay. Okay, the only two more terms, I realize I'm giving a lot of terms, but I warned you. Two more terms I want to discuss is an affirmative easement and a negative easement. Okay. An affirmative easement and a negative easement. Okay. I'll start with negative. A negative easement means you will not, like this, the owner of land will not do something. So let me give you an easy example, right? Let's say that you have, okay, well, let's say you have a feedlot. We discussed this last week, right? And your cows are making a lot of smells, and a lot of manure and other stuff, right? A negative easement could basically say, you will not keep your cows near the property line, right? You will not keep your cows near the property line. That way all the smells waft up. You got to keep them somewhere else. And you could actually negotiate an easement to prevent someone from, laying their cows near the property line. Okay? Negative easement. A positive easement is that the owner of land has to do something, right? So let's ask like this. I don't know. Let's say that there are a lot of let's say there are a lot of weeds that grow along the border, and these weeds are harming someone's crops. You say that every month you're required to trim the weeds near the border of the land, right? That would be an affirmative easement. The distinction between affirmative and negative is often very subtle. I'm actually teaching Obamacare later tonight, so I guess it's a fitting generalization. But you can often frame the exact same duty as affirmative or negative. So, like this, negative. You cannot keep your cows near the border. Positive. You need to move your cows away from the border. Right? Again, negative. You cannot keep your cows near the border. Affirmative. You must move your cows away from the border. Virtually anything you can frame as a negative easement, you can flip it and put it as a positive. I don't want you to get too caught up in the difference between the two because it doesn't matter. it really doesn't. And students trying to wrap their heads around the logic, they're two sides of the same coin. It's different ways of saying the same thing, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. Okay. Questions? I just threw a lot of words at you. Go back and reread this list after class and make sure you guys get it, because this is probably the most, up to this point, the most vocabulary you've gotten in a class. Anything? Any questions? Yes, sir.
If they don't matter, why have they been defined and separated like that? Do they ever matter at some point?
The short answer is yes. And when we discuss covenants, it'll make more sense. Because with covenants, it kind of makes a difference. But for now, don't worry too much about it. The book actually does a little bit of a history, which I know law students tend to hate. But the reason why these doctrines are so overlapping and complicated is that you had courts over the course of hundreds of years approving this type of easement, approving this type of covenant, but not that type of covenant. And all these different rules kind of came jumbled together. And that's why you have like 5 different ways of saying the same thing. And Ryan, your question is a fair one, but for present purposes, don't worry too much about the difference. When you do covenants, it'll matter a little bit more. Yeah, but not for easements. Questions? Oh, good. All right, let's do the first case. I have 2, but Willard versus First Church of Christ Scientists, 1972 case. Okay, so where was I at? Marcel. So Marcel, we have a case from California. What do you think the court's going to do before we even read it? Yeah, you guys are a quick study, right? Exactly. So we have here a case from California involving the creation of easements. The creation of easements. So Marcella, before we dive into the facts of this case, at common law, how would two parties go about creating an easement? Could I just say, let's use our familiar example, right? Our familiar example. I own dry acre, you own wet acre, right? Could I just say, you know, sitting around doing nothing, hey, Marcella, you know what? I'm on dry acre, my chickens are thirsty. Can you give me an easement so my chickens come onto your land? Could you do that at common law? Why could we just not negotiate a common law, an easement just like that?
I have no idea. It's about feudal considerations. I don't know. I don't know why they.
Or let me ask you a question. What was the correct way at common law to actually create an easement? What had to be done?
Wouldn't the grantor pass his full interest to the grantee? And
Yes.
the grantor would pass it back?
Yes. Very good. So when Dominique first raised the example of the gathering wood as reciprocal cost, I didn't say anything, right? But traditionally at common law, the only way to create an easement was to actually convey the piece of land with the easement on it. Let me say that again. At common law, Marcel and I can't just negotiate an easement. We would actually need to sell a piece of property, right? So effectively, I would need to sell her, or she, okay, look like this. Marcella would need to sell me dry acre, right? And the process of selling me dry acre, she would leave an easement on wet acre. Let me explain this one more time. The only way to put an easement on the piece of land was if it's involved in a sale or a transaction. You could not just negotiate an easement between two people like you would a contract. So in other words, when I go ahead and I want to buy dry acre from Marcella, in the process of buying dry acre, I then include an easement for the benefit of dry acre to burden wet acre. That initial transaction must take place. Okay, so let's just look at the facts here. Okay, so Jessica, what were the facts in the Church of Christ case? Yeah, McGugan, right? Yeah.
She had 2 lots, 19
Okay, hurry up. 19 to 20. Okay, go on.
and one of them had building, one of them had
Okay, so there's a building here. Okay, so there's kind of an empty lot over here. Proceed, please.
It was across the street from our church.
Okay.
And she had been permission to use it as a parking lot on church services. And then she sold one of the building, all of the building, to Peterson.
Okay.
And he wanted to sell, so he.
Well, okay, let's stop for a second. Okay, so far so good, right? So what happens is you have the church over here, this little purple square. I guess you have these fuchsia squares. Your textbook editors have purple and fuchsia, right? So you have a church here. A lady, McGugan, owns these 2 lots, and as a matter of custom, she allows people during church services to park on lot number 20. So just before we move on, would the church have any claim to acquiring lot 20 through some sort of adverse possession doctrine? Well, it's continuous, but which you can grant through adverse possession if the churchgoers park there every single week, every Sunday. What are the elements of adverse possession? That's a mini review for next week. Haley?
I think the problem in that case would be that she was behind.
So what element of adverse possession was lacking? The hostile part, right? It wasn't hostile, right? It was with permission. Something's with permission, it's not adverse possession. All right? Okay, so Haley, you're up now. So when Peterson owned lot 19, right? Peterson made a transaction, right? What did he want to sell, Haley?
Peterson,
Yeah. What did he want to sell?
you wanted to resell a lot.
Which lot? Be precise.
I think 19. You wanted to use the building as an office.
Hold on. No. Willard was a real estate agent, right? Willard wanted to buy which lots?
19.
19 and 20. Okay, Haley, which lot did Peterson actually own?
Really, 19.
He only owned 19. Did he own 20? Okay, so this is the classic case of property where someone tries to sell a piece of land that they do not own. I mean, you'll see this up and down this class, okay? So, Urvashi, can you sell a piece of land you do not own? I mean, you can, but you're not allowed to, right? People do it all the time. So what did Peterson do in order to convey lot 20?
When he approached Lady Buchan with an offer that he would buy the compound.
Yes. Okay, so I'll stop right there. So this happens a lot. Someone offers to sell a piece of land they don't own. They go and buy it, and then they actually sell it. So at the time the offer was made, Peterson did not own lot number 20. But by the time he engaged in the transaction, he was now the record owner. Okay, I think we did a question a week ago or so where someone actually sells a piece of land they don't own, and then they buy it afterwards, right? That's not this. Here he actually acquired it before he sold it. But Urvashi, in the process of acquiring it, what happened with the church?
When he was buying his compound, the original owner went to the attorney to make sure the easement was on the deed, and they put in the easement on the sales deed, I guess, which said that the lot 20 would be used as parking for the church, for church purposes. And then that clause was inserted into the deed, and it was only after then that she sold the property.
Okay, very good. So when Peterson went to Miss McGugan and said, hey, I want to buy lot 20, she said, okay, that's fine. But, you know, I want to make sure that the church has this for a parking lot. So during service, that people can have a place to put their car. So the easement says like this. It says, the easement, quote, runs with the land so long as the property for whose benefit easement is given is used for the church purposes. So there's that phrase, runs with the land, right? And as I described before, the phrase runs with the land means it goes on and on and on. Even after Miss McGugan's dead, and then Mr. Peterson's dead, and after Willard's dead, and even if the church attorney's dead, it keeps going. So effectively, Miss McGugan was permanently burdening the land to use as a parking lot for the church. Okay? Rachel, what could anyone actually do with that land with lot 20? What could actually be done there? Yeah. If the easement basically says that the church can use it whenever they want, what value does lot 20 have? Absolutely not. Why does that have no value? Why can't you build anything there? Bingo, right? This effectively rendered the land useless, right? Because on any given Sunday, literally, it can be used as a parking lot, right? You can't build something that has to be used for church parking, right? Anyone want to think of what it could be used for? I always have a couple students come with the creative stuff. Anyone have any? Yeah. Oh, a parking garage, right? That's actually not, that's a good one, right? So a parking garage, and you get free validated parking to the churchgoers, right? They have to stamp the thing with the church, right?
So you
Doesn't have to be free, it can be discounted.
Oh, no. I appreciate your profit motive seeking, right? But Ryan, what do you think would happen? No, I'm serious, Ryan. Very good insight. What do you think would happen if you started charging the church for parking? What do you think the church would? What do you think the church would do to you? No, they do more than complain. What would they do? They'd sue based on the easement. They say that you're in violation of easement, and because the easement runs with the land, whoever owns it's bound by it.
Does it say they have to go to park there for free though?
What's that?
Does it say they have to go to park there for free?
No, and so this is an important part, right? When you're framing the easement, this one's really broad. It says, and I'll read the quote again. So long as a property for whose benefit is given is used for church purposes, right? As long as there's church purposes, and that's a broad definition going on, you have to be able to allow people to do it. And if church purposes includes parking their station wagons and minivans, well, then you have to let that go. And I'm glad you brought that up, because if you disagree about the scope of an easement, right? You say, oh, fine, I'll have a parking garage. I'm going to charge these guys for parking. You'll get sued. And if the court finds that you're in violation of the easement, they'll demolish the parking garage. They'll get an injunction to take it down because you're burdening their usage. Or if you maybe make it for free. Or maybe they're not enough spots, right? The way this easement was drafted, I'll get you in a second. The way this easement was drafted basically renders it worthless because the church has first usage over the land for any purpose.
Is there any term in that easement about her being responsible for upkeeping and maintaining the parking lot?
So again, this is very broad. So presumably, if you say, okay, screw it, I'm just going to make things like a mud pit, right?
Yeah.
You're probably violating the easement because you're not allowing church purposes. You're affirmatively making it difficult for church purposes. That's the difficulty with easements because you're basically taking a stick permanently out. It's a serious burden, right, Aaron?
So they can put, tents out there and have parties, and they can do anything they want with the land.
Temporary structures.
That broad easement. I mean, they can walk out and say, we're gonna have a, carnival, or whatever they want, whenever they want.
If it gets in the way of church purposes, they may get sued. And any permanent structure would probably be demolished.
So church wants.
Someone once said billboards. A billboard might be a good idea to do, but not much more. Jeffrey?
If you built a multi-level parking garage, right? So the church would have access to say the bottom floor, which would be about the same size as a regular parking lot. And the church grows in size, and they start taking additional floors of the parking lot.
Yeah.
Could you have any?
Well, and again, the easement in this book case is extremely broad, and this would have to get litigated. So if you're a bank and you say, "Hey, I want a loan for $1 million for a parking garage," right? They do a title search to find this easement. They say, "Well, this easement basically says if you build this here and the church doesn't like it, they demolish the parking garage. I'm not giving you a loan." Right? Once you have this easement on record, your land is worthless because no one will give you money to build because you might get an injunction and tear down this garage.
Can you make a limitation of the easement to say that the person who has the easement has like secondary go with the land? So for instance, the cattle, say wet acres, you got the easement that you're allowed to bring dry acres cattle on. Can you say you're allowed to bring dry acres cattle on so long as there's enough water for wet acres cattle?
Yes. And I think the problem here, which is because of the facts of the case, Peterson was a crook. Brian, you think Mr. Peterson cared about how the easement was drafted? No. And that's why this case is problematic. He basically accepted whatever easement Ms. McGugan wrote. In a normal situation, if someone wanted to give this easement, say, screw it, I'm not buying the land. I'm not buying this land. I can't do anything with it. But he was a crook. He didn't care. He wanted to get this done as quickly as possible so he could flip it onto Willard. Now, query why Willard wasn't aware of this, but that's a different story. Okay, Josh.
Would be broad enough to say that using it for any purpose besides church purposes would be violating the easement? So even if you had a parking garage and let all the churchgoers go to it, then
I don't know what happened if they turned into a mosque one day or a synagogue. Is that church purposes? These become actually fairly difficult questions of statutory, or not statutory, but a construction of the document of how to interpret it, right? But again, the question becomes: there's serious cloud, there's a doubt over the title. No one will lend you money to build anything, and no one will be stupid to build a permanent structure if a court might say demolish that. Brian?
And the superior tenement, they can't technically violate the easement, right?
So here, which one, Ryan? Which one's dominant? Which one's servient?
The dominant would be the church.
Yes, sir. And who's servient?
Whoever owns
The parking lot, exactly, right? So the church is sitting pretty. All they have to do is send their people over there. They don't have to do much.
Okay, what if you blow up the church and the church is no longer
Oh
there?
God. I think it's called unclean hands and perhaps a hate crime at that. I don't know.
Well, a natural disaster comes by.
A natural, well, okay, better. Mississippi burning, right? A better example, right? A hurricane wipes through and demolishes the church. And let's say they build a Taco Bell there, right? Aaron, right? Okay, you're up next. They build a Taco Bell there. Could the Taco Bell benefit and have the people park across the street? Just church purposes, right? So I'm guessing there has to be a church. So maybe this church is demolished, to build another church. Okay. Rachel.
So if.
Guys, one at a time, yeah. What?
So church members decide to keep it Taco Bell. They could theoretically, because we're.
But you see here, okay, one at a time. You see here, this is why these easements are so difficult, because you have these debates and arguments about how a court may interpret it. No one will build something with that kind of jeopardy. Okay, Nolly?
Yes, because I'm just confused, because we know, I want to, my question is there necessity to constitute the easement? Because for example, the wet cow, day cow, because my land have no water, so I want to make cattle to your land to have water. And the next case is because I have to use your entrance, your road to get in entrance to my house. So I want to know whether there is a necessity. So I mean, because here this church is used for parking. So is the necessity to constitute the easement? Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I understand. So the question is this, right? What happens if, the only place I can park is there?
Yeah.
Or what happens if the only place for me to get water for my chickens is on Wet Acre, right?
Yeah.
Read for Wednesday. The topics for Wednesday is called easement by necessity. Sorry. On Wednesday, you will discuss easement by necessity. Where imagine this, right? You live on top of a mountain. And the only way to get there is if you trespass across someone's land to get up there. There's only one path. Let's say there was a landslide, right? And the entire path was destroyed. You need to trespass someone else's. So in certain cases, courts award easement by necessity for the exact purpose you asked. But your question is looking all the way into the future to Wednesday. Thank you very much. Very good question. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
I can't find any more, but for some reason it's in my mind that Willard didn't know there was an easement.
Willard did not know there was an easement. Why did Willard not know there was an easement?
I don't think Peterson told him.
Bingo. So here's the problem, right? Peterson never told Willard of the easement. Chase, why do you think Peterson didn't say anything?
Well, because I don't think anybody wants to buy a lot with an easement.
Yeah, but why do you think, should Willard have had a duty to disclose that?
Or Peterson.
I'm sorry, should Pearson have had a duty to disclose it?
Absolutely.
Right. So it's unclear if it was actually recorded. It wasn't clear in the case. I think this all happened so quickly within the span of a couple of days that there probably was no title search. In fact, if I had to guess, Willard did a title search based on how things were before, and there are no easements in the lot. So the fact is, Peterson sold it probably around the same time stuff was being recorded. So I'm guessing that's why Willard didn't know. But if you notice, who are the parties here? Is Willard? It's Willard and the church. Is Peterson a party? So probably what happened. Oh, let's go, Dagny. What do you think? What do you think Willard did to Peterson when they found out he failed to disclose the easement? What do you mean got rid of him? They blew up his church, or what? They offed him. What do you think? What do you think Willard did when he found out that Peterson? They what? He did disappear. What do you think? What do you think Peterson did? Willard did. I keep getting confused. Yeah, they sued him for fraudulent misrepresentation, right? If Peterson sold this without disclosing easement, no doubt Willard sued him for fraudulent misrepresentation. But this case was basically Willard and the church were disagreeing about whether this easement was valid. Now let's actually get to the facts of this case, right? Okay, so Yolanda, under the common law, right, where Willard just gave an easement onto the lot 20, the parking lot, right? under the common law, was this sort of transaction valid? Where Miss McGugan basically just gave a easement for the benefit of the church, even though the church wasn't involved in the transaction.
Or wait, what?
Under the common law, was this transaction valid where McGugan basically just reserved the benefit for a third party, even though she wasn't involved in this conveyance of land? No, what was holding the case? Wow, wait, only 2 cases today.
I know. And
Eduardo?
No, in common law, we can do that.
Why?
Well,
Under the common law, why could Ms. McGugan not reserve the benefit for the third party, the church?
I think what I understand from the rule is that you could only do that if the third person was your spouse. But I'm not sure if I get that right.
You want to try, Chris?
The grantor would be giving interest directly to the grantee, so you could go directly to the grant for the third party.
Exactly, okay? So under the common law rule, easements can only occur between a grantor and a grantee, right? McGugan sells the land to Peterson. The only easement between those 2 people. Under the common law, you couldn't create it for the benefit of the third person. Okay? So, which rule, Alex? Which rule did the Willard prefer?
You wanted the Willard.
Willard was the real estate agent.
Oh, he wanted the common law?
Yes. Why did Willard want the common law rule?
Because he would be protected then because
Yeah.
like it was only between him and
McGugan, yeah. Everyone see that, right? Willard wanted the common law rule, right? Because under the common law rule, the interest of the third party church is void. Everyone see that? So Ryan, let me ask you this question, a follow-up to that. Let's assume that Willard discovered that there's actually a recorded easement, right? And you're Willard's lawyer. And you say, hey, is this easement under California law valid? It's a benefit to third party. What do you say?
Before this case?
Yeah, when this happened, before it happened.
No, it's not valid common law rule.
So if you're advising Willard, you say, do you have to worry about this church's easement? Okay, everyone see that. If you're, yeah, you just got there, right? Yeah.
Practice.
Oh, no. I'm going to come back to you in a second, right? So under the common law, as it existed for 200 years in California, if you were Ryan, you were advising Willard's lawyer, you say, wait a minute, there's this easement for the benefit of the church. You say, oh, that ain't worth the paper it's written on. That stupid church lawyer didn't know what he was doing, right? He screwed up. So, Chase, is Ryan liable for malpractice?
I think that'd be tough.
Well, no. Did he make an
No.
incorrect statement of California law when he gave this advice? When did his advice become wrong? After the court overruled the 100-year-old precedent, right? So this is a difficulty, right? Whenever we say, oh yeah, the New Jersey court or the California court reversed precedent, well, people rely on this, right? Ryan gave his client Willard advice saying, oh, don't worry about this easement. It won't hold up in court. It won't hold up in court. But the problem is the court, as we shall see in a second, to reverse this common law rule. So now Ryan's advice, which looked really good before the transaction occurred, would in the future amount to legal malpractice. And the court even hints at this, saying, well, you know, people relied on it. They say, oh, no one relied on it. Oh, I disagree. I bet Willard's lawyer said, this thing's not worth paper it's written on. Just go for it. Build there. And that's why they sued to quiet title and ascertain who actually owns it. So it's very difficult to litigate property issues in a state that randomly reverses common law rules because you don't have notice, right? Imagine this, right? You're advising your client saying, here's this precedent. It's 100 years old. You know, there's decades of case law on this. You guys are fine. Don't worry about this easement to the church. It's a third party, not valid, right? And your client spends all this money investing and buying a piece of land. And finally, you get to the California Supreme Court, and never mind, not fair. right? This is the difficulty of radical changes in the law. This is why it's much better to have a statutory change, so people then have notice and going forward, yada, yada, yada. But here it's, your advice is wrong. And that makes it a tough spot for a California lawyer. Okay. So Tyler, why did the court here reverse the common law rule? Why did they get rid of this this rule?
I think they said that it no longer matter. Well, they look. I know they looked at two different things, that he didn't have title insurance, because he brought up a couple different points, Willard did.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, just answer the question. Why do you think they jettisoned? Why do you think they dumped this common law rule? What do you think was going through the California court's mind? And they're very open about it. They're not like, they're not trying to do it quietly.
Well, they looked at the Oregon court, and I know they looked at Kentucky, and just wanted to follow those.
Yeah, why did those courts reverse the common law rule? You're exactly right. Why did those courts reverse the common law rule?
So it was inconsistent with the basic principle followed in the construction of deeds, which is to, well, this was the.
Good, yeah, keep going. You're on the right track, yeah.
Entirely inconsistent with the basic principle followed in the construction of deeds, which is to determine the intention of grantor.
Bingo. Okay, stop right there. Is there any doubt here, let's go on to Eric. Is there any doubt here why McGugan sold the land the way she did with this easement? Is there any doubt what her intent is?
No.
What was her intent?
She wanted to keep the easement.
For the benefit of the church, right?
Yeah, I mean, why even sell it? I don't know that either of them are good actors in this point, by the way. It's just saying.
Why do you say that?
Well, because she obviously wanted to sell useless land that couldn't be used for anything.
Uh-huh.
And he obviously wanted to get rid of the land that he didn't.
How much do you think McGugan's got for the amount for the land with this burden on it?
Well, he didn't know about it.
No. McGugan, when she sold to Peterson.
Oh.
Do you think she sold it for a lot of money?
No.
And in fact, I think it was in the case that she said she decreased the purchase price, right? Because she knew the burden. Yeah. So this point, look, it's not an entirely useless piece of land, right? Maybe he wanted to use it for a parking lot also, not blowing anything up, but maybe he would have a parking lot Monday through Friday, and then on Sunday the land is, the Lord rests, and the parking lot's empty, right? I mean, it's not entirely worthless. It's pretty worthless, but it's not entirely worthless. Yeah. But her intent, as you said, was 100% clear. She wanted to reserve the benefit for the church. And what the court basically says is, okay, why don't we give effect to what the grantor, Ms. McGugan, wanted, right? Why don't we actually do what she said? Why should we be chained by feudalism, which is an apt phrase, right? Why should we just do something because we've been doing it for 800 years? In a word, fairness, right? That's our magic word, right? The magic word is fairness. And in other words, it's not fair. McGugan wanted to do this. Willard should have known about this, right? Peterson knew about this and failed to disclose it. Don't punish the church that they got this benefit. Everyone with me? Yes, Ryan.
My whole thing on this is they're saying you shouldn't harm the church here, but the lawyer for the church
Was an
should
idiot.
have known that it was crap.
Yeah.
Then they're not actually being hurt at all. The lawyer should have known that it was crap.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. Again, the church lawyer here was a screw up. He did not do this correctly. And in fact, he could have written something very specific. He didn't do it right. But I think what they're trying to say is McGugan was the innocent party here. She was the old lady, wanted to give to the church. Her intent was clear. I think we're trying to protect McGugan's intent.
Well, I mean, this doesn't happen in the vacuum. Right? Like, I'm sure the law has been courts and opinions and things, and I'm sure there's been a lot of dissents. Like, everything is trending towards one way.
Okay, Ryan. So if you're a California lawyer, right, and you see that dissents are trending one way, what do you tell your client?
I would, advise them honestly. Tell them, look, this is what the law is now, but literally at the flip of a coin, any day it may change.
Ain't that something, right? Doing business in that sort of climate, it's not very good to do business in.
No.
Right, and indeed, if you guys are California lawyers, this is what you have to deal with. Any given day, press can be overturned, and that makes it really tough to give legal advice. Other questions?
There was a pretty big discussion on reservations versus sections.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
I understand.
Yeah, the book put a long. I wish I would just cut that footnote out. It's not worth. It's not worth the difficulty. Don't worry about it. All right. So Josh, under the common law, right? What would have been the correct way of arranging this transaction so that the church could indeed have a reserved easement on the parking lot?
I guess it would have been for, what's her name again?
McGugan.
McGugan to sell it to the church and the church sell it back, or
Exactly. Two transactions have to occur. Two transactions. Transaction number one, McGugan sells lot 20 to the church in fee simple. McGugan sells the church lot 20 in fee simple. Transaction number two, the church sells the lot to Peterson, reserving the easement. They would actually sell it with the easement on it. In other words, the church sells a parking lot by saying, but we get to keep it for parking. That would be the correct way of doing it. So effectively, what was one transaction will become two separate transactions. I want to see that. Jack, what's the danger, though, in taking this two-step process? What's the, what's the risk here of going through these two steps? Think about it. Hold on, Josh. I think you got it.
Yeah, they might not sell it back.
Bingo. Bingo.
Yeah,
Once McGugan sells the lot in fee simple to the church, is there any guarantee the church sells it back to Peterson? No, because once they have it in fee simple, it's mine.
why would they sell it back? I mean, they could just keep it and use it for their own purposes.
Okay, right. So I'll go to you in a second. So the way you do this is with this. There's a separate contract which basically says we promise to sell this on to Peterson, or else we'll pay damages. Right. So you can contract around that, but it's risky. Jimena? No, don't do that. I told you, this was Nolly's question. Don't confuse the future interest with the servitudes.
But what if I guarantee you that they have to sell it back?
So,
Like one condition?
so I don't want to break your heart, but people don't use future interest anymore. I don't want to break your heart. So you spent 2 months of that. People no longer use future interest. They're being replaced by covenants and servitudes. Right? The reason why is that future interests are very violent, right? Because at that point in 8 generations, right, if the church goes away and a Taco Bell opens up, then Miss McGugan's great-great-grandchildren now own the church, right, or the church lot. People now use covenants and servitudes. So let us say this easily. The answer in my exam is about future interests. Easy? Yeah, it breaks, there's actually a note in the book about this, right? The only time you will probably ever deal with future interest if you have a very old instrument. If you have an old deed from the 1800s, it'll have some future interests. If you have a deed from the 20th century, it'll have an easement or covenant in it, right? So it's not to say you shouldn't know future interests, because they are important to know, but virtually no one uses them today.
Aren't they relevant for probate matters?
For old stuff, yes. So if you have an old deed that's been in a family for many years, those come up. So you do need to know them for old probate matters, old inheritances, things. But if you're writing property documents today, you're probably not going to use a future interest. You'll use a covenant or an easement or a servitude of some sort. I hate to break your hearts, right? It's like I told you Santa Claus isn't real, one of those kids. Exactly. Any other questions on this case? Anything else on this case? All right, so the other topic, the other term, as if I've not given you enough terms today, is called a license. Okay, a license. And there's a special meaning of license in property. It's not like a driver's license, something else. A license basically means oral permission to enter property or to use property. And all of you use licenses all the time. You probably don't realize it, right? When the plumber knocks on your door, you say, okay, come on in. You can fix the toilet, right? Or when the pizza guy knocks on your door, like, okay, come on in, give me the pizza. You give someone oral permission to use your land. But the important point about these oral permissions is that they are revocable. They can be revoked at any time for any reason, for any purpose, right? I tell the the plumber to come fix my toilet. He sits there, watching TV. I say, get the hell out, right? Your licenses are temporary in nature and they're revocable. Okay. That much is easy, right? And there's really not much difficulty there. We have this case, Holbrook versus Taylor. Okay. And Holbrook versus Taylor, this is the Kentucky case, raises issues of what happens when licenses should not be revocable. Okay. So what happened, Jackson, in Holbrook? I don't need the full timeline, but just generally speaking, what happened?
Okay, well, one time they built a road on the land because there's some mining.
Okay, yeah. So you had one guy on the piece of land, and someone else built a road on it, right? And then what happened?
And then there's the plaintiffs. They
Okay.
bought some land that in order to get to it, they had to cross the road. And at one time, the whole books let them use the land.
Good.
And I think the Taylors like made improvements on the
Yes, very important, right?
and they built a house.
Very good.
And something happened. Something bad happened. And
Yeah.
They said you couldn't use the road anymore.
Okay, very good. So, Jackson, let me ask you this question. If there had been an easement, a written easement, by the way, I think I mentioned this, but easements must be in writing. They must satisfy the statute of frauds. Okay? But let's say there had been Jackson, there had been easement in writing. Could the owner of the serving estate just decide, nah, I don't like you anymore. I'm going to build a cable to block you? Why not?
It's very interesting in the land now.
Yes. Easements run with the land. They're effectively permanent. But the difference is this was oral. There was nothing written here. Oral licenses are revocable. So let's say, Brandon, if I say for 20 years, yep, you can use my road, you can build a road here, you can improve upon it, it's simply oral. What if I say tomorrow, change my mind, you can't use it anymore. I'm going to put up a steel cable and block access to the road. Can I do that?
No, because it's you promised it for 20 years.
What does the promise mean? I'm letting you. It's my own decision. What do you think, Will?
Why you can't do that?
Yeah. For 20 years, I've been saying, yeah, you can use the road, whatever, I don't care. And then one day I wake up to the wrong side of my bed and say, yeah, scrap, get off, I'm going to put a steel cable.
Because they rely on it.
Yeah, the key word used is reliance, okay? What this case demonstrates is that while generally a license is revocable, you can revoke at any time, when there's been reliance, when there's been some sort of detrimental reliance, which is a term you're familiar with from contracts, when there's been a detrimental reliance, a license becomes irrevocable. It's a matter of equity or fairness. And what's most important for this case is the fact that someone invested money to improve on the road. A rule of thumb for equity is if you invest money into something, you will probably get whatever equity ought to give, right? If you spent your own money to improve upon the land and build this road, courts become very sympathetic to those claims because at that point, you've now lost money. And if someone else takes that road away from you, you're now in a worse position you were than when you started. Okay. So what happens here is that because they detrimentally relied, the court says that effectively there's estoppel. And estoppel means fairness one way or the other. Okay, any questions on that part of the case? Jeff, let's talk about adverse possession for a moment. So I think we used this word earlier in the semester, but I told you not to worry about it. But if I sit on a piece of land for 10 years, and I live there every day for 10 years, I've gained it through adverse possession. A synonym for adverse possession is prescription. Okay? You'll see this word used both ways. Adverse possession, prescription, no, synonyms, they mean the same thing. A prescriptive easement is different, though, than adverse possession. What a prescriptive easement means is that every day I walk across a piece of land. So imagine at this road in this coal mine, right? I walked across this land every single day for 20 years. Okay? Jeff, in this situation, in this case we have here, does the fact that you walked across the road every day for 20 years mean that you gained a prescriptive easement?
It could, if I really relied on it, if I didn't have any other methods they give.
No. What are the elements? You're asking actually not this question of necessity. But what are the elements of adverse possession in this case where they met?
In this case,
Yes, sir.
Well, there wasn't a trespass because he was invited on the land.
Bingo. Winner, winner, right? If someone lets you onto their land, right? Someone says, yeah, you're allowed to cross my road every day. There's no hostility. And in this case, because there's no hostility, you can't satisfy the elements. The elements of adverse possession prescription are the exact same. They're the same elements, right? Because this was permissive, he had permission to use the road for 20 years, there was no hostility, therefore there's no claim for adverse possession. Everyone see that? Everyone get that? Now let's ask this question. What happens if you trespass on a road every day for 20 years? And the owner says, get off my road. And you say, I don't care what you say. And every day you walk across the road. What happens?
Yes, if I cross road for 20 years every day, and you claimed, and I don't care.
Yeah.
It's prescription.
Exactly. You'd actually gain a prescriptive easement. And here's the rub of prescriptive easement. In terms of the bundle of sticks, right? I no longer have a fee simple absolute because my fee simple is now burdened by knowledge prescriptive easement. So whenever I sell my land to someone else, that land will be burdened by her prescriptive easement. Isn't that something, right? I think I mentioned this when we did adverse possession, but in Rockefeller Center in Manhattan, right? There's a little private sidewalk right by 30 Rock. And for one day every year, the owner of the building shuts down that private sidewalk. And the purpose of that is expressly to defeat any prescriptive easements. Because what if someone, people want to live on the sidewalk, right? But you can imagine Manhattan, someone just walks across Rockefeller Center every day on the way to work or to house, whatever. So one day a year, they shut down that sidewalk. And that's to defeat a prescriptive easement. Imagine what happened if someone had a prescriptive easement on 30 Rockefeller Center in Manhattan. It'd be worth millions of dollars to get rid of them, right? She could hold that for any amount of money if she did that. So that's why prescriptive easements are very dangerous. Okay, you'll often see, if anyone's ever lived by a beach, signs to say, "You may cross with my permission." You've seen this? Where have you seen it?
Well, I saw this funny picture on the internet about someone in Ireland, and they had this big, beautiful field, and it said, you can pass if you can run across the field in 9 seconds, because the bull can do it in 10 or something.
Well, that wouldn't be very permissive, would it?
Well,
yeah, dodging bullets here, right? So, but you often see by the beach, right, these signs that say, you may cross my land, right? And the reason is this. The water itself, right, even as a property owner, you cannot block access to the water itself. But you have to give people access to the water. We'll do a case like this I think on Wednesday, in fact, right? You have to give people access to the water. But if you make it hostile, you say, well, you can get to the water, but you can't cross my property. If someone does that every day for 10 years, they just gained a prescriptive easement, you've lost a stick in your bundle, right? So this case establishes, two things. It establishes that when there's reliance, you can actually have a license become irrevocable, right? But also, you can have the prescriptive easement if there's hostility and you cross for the period of 10 or 15 years, whatever it happens to be. Okay. Yes, sir.
So do prescriptive rights only get you easement and gross?
Yes. Yes, prescriptive right will only get you an easement and gross because it benefits a person who actually trespassed every day for 20 years. Okay, questions? No? I will see you on Wednesday. Have a good day.